Good morning, afternoon, and evening. All this is Yorkie with episode 5 of my sit and chat series. It was due to come out earlier, or last week. However, I kind of screwed up relatively big time on this video, so I basically had to scrap the whole project and start again. But obviously, with other things going on in my life, it took me a couple of days before I could get round to doing it. So here it is. And we will jump in with question number 1 from Super Elite Gamer 123. Why is it that Webber has any car problems every race and Vettel has a perfect car? I think they are tampering with his car. You, I wouldn't necessarily say that Vettel has a perfect car, because obviously at Monza, Vettel had to manage gearbox problems. Webber did as well, obviously. Both cars were struggling in that sort of sense, and I think Webber's was actually worse than Vettel's case. Webber was having to short shift from 3rd up into 4th, and Vettel was having to short shift 5th up into 6th, I think, which would hinder the top speed, but obviously he was further up ahead, out in clear air, and didn't really have anyone around him, whereas Webber was trying to get past Alonso. But yeah. So, I wouldn't necessarily say the mechanics are tampering with the car, or anyone is tampering with the car. I think it's more the case that the mechanics working on Vettel's car are doing I wouldn't say a better job, although I would say a better job. Basically, they're looking after Vettel's car a lot better than Mark's. And that's for a number of reasons. Obviously, Vettel is a 3 times world champion and is in the running for being world champion again this year. Therefore, the mechanics will want to make sure that the car is in tip-top condition, making sure that there's very few possibilities of something going wrong to help maximize the amount of points that Vettel can get. Whereas Webber isn't always necessarily in the running for the championship, and therefore he doesn't really get, well, his mechanics, although they'll have the mentality to have the car as best as it possibly can, the mechanics on Vettel's side of the garage will actually it'll go that little bit further just to reduce the chances of a failure, so to speak. And I think, obviously, to go alongside that, I think Vettel may get preference on, well, not necessarily preference, but you know, he'll get the best batch of parts that have come through, like to make sure that there is absolutely nothing wrong with them at all. But I think that's one of the reasons. Also, I think another one is the fact that Vettel is spending most of the time out in front running in clear air. We all know that F1 cars are designed to run in clear air and not in the wake of another car in front, which is where Webber tends to find himself. He tends to be in and amongst the field fighting and battling for positions, whereas Vettel's off miles ahead. Obviously this leads to a number of different things. Lack of downforce through corners means slightly more turning has to be put into the wheel. Obviously that puts the tyres under more stress, also the suspension and numerous other things. Obviously engine and brakes aren't getting the cooling that they optimally need, and that sort of thing, which all just over time will eventually equate to a slightly more increased chance of something going wrong, possibly. It's logical to think about it in that way, if you get what I mean, because obviously being out in front, the car's getting the optimum downforce, it's getting the optimum brake temperatures and airflow through the radiators in the side pods and also in through the brakes, which means they're all at optimum temperature. Nothing is going to go wrong with the car, supposedly, or ideally. It shouldn't go wrong in any way. Sometimes it does. There's no denying that sometimes, for whatever reason, something does happen, it does break. But being in different conditions to what the cars are actually designed and optimal to run at, will increase the chance of a failure somewhere along the line. So I think that is the main reason as to why Webber is always, not always, but is, you know, has more issues than Vettel does. I think that's what it is. That would be my answer from it, obviously. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in this episode. But yeah, the next question is by Guido Hutes. I think that's how you say it. But he said, I wrote this after qualifying for Monza, and I think Alonso is digging his own grave in Ferrari team with his blunt statements towards the team. And it's not the first time he's done so. How do you see this? I didn't actually watch qualifying, so I kind of missed what he actually said, but I read a couple of articles after it, and I believe it's Alonso just basically criticising the team, saying we need to get the car sorted, the car isn't perfect, you're ruining my championship hopes, and that he also called them idiots over the team radio because of the tow that Ferrari always like to do at Monza, where Massa drives ever so slightly ahead of Alonso, and then down the straight Alonso gets the slipstream off of Massa and makes a pass, basically just gaining an advantage that way, which in a way is a very risky strategy, because obviously in the corners leading up to the straight where Alonso is meant to slingshot past Massa, he's losing downforce, therefore he's losing time, and he's also losing grip on his tyres. He's putting more load through the tyres, which means that they wear out more, and obviously they're not in as a greater condition as they could be. Obviously it's on a very minute scale, there's only a couple of corners, but nonetheless, as they always like to say at Tesco's, every little helps. Yeah. So that strategy didn't actually work out because Massa was too far ahead of Alonso for Alonso to pick up the slipstream and slingshot past. Therefore, that strategy didn't work out. Alonso got hindered and was probably actually further down the grid than he initially predicted, and the team initially predicted. And quite rightly so, in Alonso's frustration, he called the team idiots over the radio, which unfortunately the world of F1 and media saw and heard, and obviously they like to build controversial stories, blow things out of proportion, and make it look a lot worse than it actually is, when it's actually, well, yeah, it's Fernando venting his frustration, but who wouldn't be frustrated in that sort of situation? If you've organised a plan with your team and your teammate doesn't follow along with that plan and it affects you in a negative way, you're going to be pissed. So yeah, it was a risky strategy in the first place, probably one that I don't really agree with. It's not necessarily in the spirit of the sport and in qualifying, but you know, if it doesn't work like it did, it brings out a lot of bad things, which it has. But yeah, actual digging his own grave with blunt statements. You have to give the teams, if you're a driver, you have to give a team negative feedback every now and then, because obviously no car is ever perfect, and you need to improve the car in many different ways. And saying that sort of thing to the media and press obviously puts it out there that you want the car improved, and that should motivate your team to basically develop the parts and get those parts in and find solutions to problems with the car. Obviously it gets to a point where you're not criticizing constructively criticizing the team anymore and giving them feedback, and more just whining and bitching about them, saying, oh yeah, my car's shit, it's all the team's fault, I'm trying to do the best I can, but obviously without the car I can't win races. I don't think Alonso's quite doing that. He's more just, he's making it very clear that he isn't happy with the car, and the world of F1 can kind of can kind of see that and see that the car isn't as good as it should be. In race conditions, it's very, very good. However, in qualifying on its one lap pace, it's not great at all. You can see that from its qualifying results. The Fernando's always qualifying around probably about 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th in the grid, and therefore has to fight his way forward through the race to get those podium positions and the race wins. Obviously, he's able to do that because the race pace on the car is actually very, very good, and of course Fernando has an awful lot of talent and experience, so he's able to get the results in the race day in the end. But obviously if he had the qualifying results as well to push him further up the grid in the first place, he could be onto race wins and, you know, a much closer battle for the championship, and maybe even leading it, because Vettel isn't too far ahead in the championship. Yeah, he's a little bit of a way. I'm not exactly sure how many points exactly, but you know, it's not. We've got what, 7? I think it's about 7 races we got left, so that gap can be closed if the F1 gods are kind to everyone else, and things don't quite go Vettel's way but go more Alonso's way, shall we say, or Kimi's or Hamilton's, because they're all kind of in the running, although Hamilton is, the last couple of races haven't gone well for him, so his title hopes are slowly fading. But yeah, it can be seen as digging a grave, and obviously the team will be frustrated that he's saying those things, but at the same time the team should take that feedback on board and basically push to improve the car. I doubt they're going to do it this late in the season, to be honest, because, you know, it's end of September. That was mid-September now. We're coming to the end of September. All the teams are going to start looking forward to 2014 and basically injecting all their cash into development for those cars with all the new regulations and things like that. And 2014 should be a very interesting season. I think it's gonna shake up the grid a fair bit. Probably see some of the top teams not doing as well as we expect, and we'll probably see some midfield or bottom teams moving themselves up the grid and challenging. So it will certainly be interesting, and I look forward to it an awful lot. But yeah, this moves very nicely onto the next question, which is by Burnout060, and he's asking, what do you think about Kimi at Ferrari? Do you think you can beat Alonso in the same equipment, and who will replace Kimi? Maybe Hulkenberg, maybe David Valeski, and what are their thoughts on Alexander? Fuck's sake. Last time when I did the recording, I took me 3 or 4 times to say Alexander Rossi. Oh, yeah, Alexander Rossi from USA in Caterham GP2. 3 podiums in his first year of GP2 racing as an American. Pretty impressive stuff. This was actually posted, I believe, before Kimi announced that he was moving to Ferrari, which was a good guess. Oh, it might have been, or the day that he released it. I wasn't too sure. But what do I think about Kimi at Ferrari? Very interesting. It's going to be... Oh, there's going to be fireworks and all sorts of other things within the team, because obviously Fernando is not used to... He's used to being number 1 and having a wingman via Massa basically as his backup, his number 2 driver. But obviously with Kimi there, he's very, very experienced. He's a very talented driver, just like Alonso, and Ferrari actually given them equal opportunity like many other teams in the grid claim to do so. So that'll be interesting to see how Ferrari and Fernando actually handle that. Obviously Kimi's been at Ferrari before, then he left to go do WRC for 2 years. I can't remember the reasons as to why Kimi actually left Ferrari, but he won a world championship there, so obviously he's going to be very happy going back, seeing the guys that he used to work with, and obviously being in a higher higher end team than Lotus, so we'll probably see Kimi, you know, getting podiums more often, but possibly winning races more often. That's providing that Ferrari have a decent 2014 car. So it will certainly be interesting. I would have said it's definitely the strongest lineup, the driver lineup on the grid, probably by far. Just by the amount of experience that both drivers have. Obviously they're quite old drivers as well. Ferrari haven't really gone for youth, they've gone for experience. But that, it will be interesting. Obviously both drivers are at very good fitness levels. I mean, Alonso has incredible fitness. I think he's like 35 or something like that. Huge amount of experience. Same with Kimi, he's relatively old, huge amount of experience. It will certainly be, they'll certainly be quick, I imagine. But yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to that lineup. That should be very good, and they'll probably end up challenging Red Bull if they have a decent car as well, for the Constructors' Championship. A lot harder than anyone else, I imagine. Do you think he can beat Alonso in the same equipment? Yes, he's beaten Alonso in Lotus before. If they're in the same equipment, yes, he can probably beat Alonso, and I'm sure Alonso can beat Kimi as well. It entirely depends on their race strategy, how their races pan out, whether things go their way or whether they don't. So that should be interesting. Who will replace Kimi? Maybe Hulkenberg, maybe David Valeski. I'd like to see Hulkenberg go to Lotus. He's being held as a young driver with a lot of talent and an awful lot of potential. I'd say so myself as well, as obviously Hulkenberg's latest result at Monza, where he qualified third, I think it is. Was either qualified second or third, and he ended up fifth in a race, which isn't bad in a Sauber, which has been a car that has been struggling this year. So that's actually really impressive. Obviously, Hulkenberg has had some very good races as well previously in Force India last year, and he is a very young guy with an awful lot of talent. I'd like to see him get the opportunity to race in a higher end team and prove to the F1 world what he can really do. Because I think he can go relatively far, along with Perez. It's just, obviously, Perez doesn't really have the car at the moment to prove what he actually has, and that's knocked his confidence a bit. Hopefully that won't happen to Hulkenberg if he does go to Lotus. Hopefully they'll provide him with a decent car and he can basically get on the attack straight from the off. But out of those two, I would have said Hulkenberg is probably more likely to get the seat. I'd prefer to see Hulkenberg get that race seat. I think De Resta as well is also knocking on the door of a couple of top teams. Which ones exactly, I don't know, but I think that De Resta also deserves a seat in a higher end team to show us what he can really do as well, as he's had some very strong races. But yeah, David Valeski, I don't really know anything about him, other than I'm actually pronouncing his name wrong. It's David Valsecchi. Yeah, he just because I was pronouncing his name wrong, I fucking don't recognise who he is. Yeah, it's David Valsecchi, who's actually doing really well in GP2 at the moment, along with Alexander Rossi. I've actually not watched any GP2 this year, nor GP3, or any of the other support races. I've only really watched the actual F1. Last year I watched a couple of the races throughout the season, mainly the start of the season, and I actually enjoyed that. So I don't really have much to say on either of those two, which obviously kind of makes the second part of that question rather redundant. I'll need to do a little bit of research on those two, maybe watch some actual like GP2 and GP3 races as well, to obviously see how well they are actually doing. But the whole moving up from GP2 to GP3 is quite a big leap for the guys. GP2 is, I've always known it to be a very, very aggressive. Obviously, it's the proving grounds for F1, so everyone's really, really pushing to try and get into F1, which leads to contacts and rather dirty driving and all sorts of other things, kind of like the League One race or Split One races from the Apex Racing League. Apparently, they weren't too clean, especially at the start of the season. The second half of the season seemed to be a lot better. But yeah, the whole sort of moving up. We've seen drivers come up from GP2. They seem to have an awful lot of cash as well, and it's interesting for them to make that jump. Some of them struggle and get dropped within the first year. Others seem to hang around. Obviously, Toro Rosso have currently got a seat available with Daniel Ricciardo moving to Red Bull. If there's any GP2 drivers that are in the Red Bull Young Drivers program, there's a possibility of them moving up into that Toro Rosso seat, which would be good to see. It's nice to see them moving up through the ranks through that way, and the actual Toro Rosso, like I said in the previous Sit and Chat episode, the Toro Rosso actually working as like a starter team for Red Bull, and the whole concept and idea of having that team as a kind of not necessarily like an entry level to F1 because they're not at the back of the grid, but you know, a great way to get into F1 in a relatively decent team and have a car that people can prove themselves in. Obviously, the lower end of the teams tend to be favourites for picking up GP2 drivers. Charles Peak for Caterham has been confirmed as with a drive for Caterham next year. I believe Marussia haven't confirmed either of their two drivers. Vandergaard hasn't been confirmed for Caterham either. I think Maldonado's staying at Williams. Valtteri Bottas is unsure. I'm not too sure if Maldonado is staying at Williams. They'll probably end up keeping him on because of the ridiculous amounts of money that he has, which is a shame. Money comes over, well, takes preference over talent at the moment, which is not a great way of doing things. Obviously, it'd be nice to see them actually putting driver talent over money for once. So yeah, there's not really much else I can say on that question other than Ferrari next year is going to be very, very interesting. I think the whole 2014 season is actually going to be very interesting. So obviously, new rules, regulations, new technical challenges, teams basically trying to see how far they can push those rules and boundaries and improve the technology that they're using. So it's going to be a tough season for a lot of the drivers, I imagine. I think obviously those teams with a lot of cash are obviously going to have a relatively big advantage over those at the bottom end of the team, so Caterham and Marussia. Obviously they can inject more cash into the development and research and basically try and get those parts, but I imagine some of them won't be working as well as others, and I imagine we'll probably see quite a few technical failures at the start of the season as well, whilst the teams try and iron out those creases. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, I reckon, the next season, with some very interesting driver lineups and teams, and I very much look forward to it. I hope you guys do as well. But yeah, I think that's going to conclude it for this episode. Please give it a rating if you have any comments or questions, and of course, if you want to post your topics for next time or your discussions on the topics that were talked about today, please leave them in the comment section below. You can also email me via YouTube. If you go onto my YouTube channel page and click on About Me, there should be a send message link where you can private email me across YouTube. Obviously, make sure that you put the subject title as Sit and Chat. That way I know it's for one of these and not just a general, hey Yorkie, can you help me sort of thing. Yeah, other than that, subscribe to the channel, like, share, favourite, do whatever you guys want to do. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope to see you soon. Take care.